G'day guys, and today we're going to be looking at genetics again, specifically epigenetics. Now going off this definition I pulled off the internet, epigenetics is the study of changes in organisms caused by a modification of their gene expression rather than an alteration of the genetic code itself. So we're not going to be talking about mutations and things of that nature and the ramifications of such, but we're going to be looking at gene expression. Now this is important because it demonstrates the way that environment can have an impact on the molding of a person. For example, if we have a look at twin studies, we can see that a twin that is raised in a more impoverished household with less access to better quality food generally doesn't grow up to be as tall as his twin who grows up in a more stable household, plenty of food and that sort of thing. This is something important to keep in mind whilst we have this great debate, this great contest of wills convincing people that there is this genetic component as to why groups around the world perform differently, why there is this disparity of outcome. We have to make sure we don't become genetic determinists. There is some wiggle room that the environment can exploit, and people are more than the sum of their genomes. Now this is where we get into epigenetics. Now I'm going to attempt to explain the chemistry behind epigenetics very simply because, that's not the focus of this video, it's more the ramifications of it. So down in the genome we have the individual genes which code for proteins. Now what can happen to these genes is they can be bonded to a methyl group, and these methyl groups are known as epigenetic tags, and what they essentially do is act like an on or off switch. Now these epigenetic tags can be flipped according to environmental factors. This is what allows for different types of cell within an organism, say muscle cells, liver cells, skin cells, to differentiate. It's called epigenetic modification. Some genes are turned on, while some genes are turned off. Now if we go back to our example of body height, if the body senses it isn't getting enough food, it won't bother to turn on the genes for growth since it doesn't have the resources to capitalize on this. And as we know, the body doesn't half-ass things, it doesn't attempt to jury-rig things at the genetic level. If it doesn't have the resources to do something, it won't bother to do so. Now, here's where things get interesting. Epigenetic switches are inheritable. They can be passed into sperm and egg cells, which combine to form a new human of the next generation. This essentially means that the environment that you live in can affect the genetic makeup of your children. Now, to counterbalance this, due to the process of fertilization, which is very complicated, I won't go into it, most of the epigenetic switches are nullified, but some remain. Now what does this mean? Well, say for example we have a family of mice. We separate the baby mice from their parents, causing them to be neglected during their upbringing. Due to the lack of nurture and care, their epigenetic switch for managing stress never flips, and as such, they are less able to handle stress as adults, despite having the genes to do so. These mice are absolutely 100% genetically coded to be able to handle stress, but due to the environment in which they grew up in, these genes never express themselves. So, what if we take these stressed out mice and breed them, and allow them to remain with their offspring in a happy family? What can occur here? Well, despite having a present and caring family structure, by the standards of mice, the new baby mice grow up less able to handle stress as they have inherited the epigenetic modification of not being able to handle stress. So that's not very good at all. Despite the fact that these baby mice grew up in a very happy and stable household, they have inherited a poor response to stress. This in itself may be very distressing news to some people. The environment in which your parents, or even your grandparents, grew up in could be having an effect on you right now. Well, there is an upside to this. You may recall that I mentioned that most epigenetic factors are nullified during fertilization. This means that over time, epigenetic modifications, like what we've seen in our mice, should disappear over time, provided they are not continually stimulated. This is known as regression to the mean. So what we should expect to see in our mice is that over successive generations, as they're allowed to have stable and caring and happy families, the mice should be better able to respond to stress. On the flip side to this, however, if we keep introducing broken families into the mice, if we take the parents away from their children and neglect the children, then the cycle will continue. The epigenetic modification will still be in place and it will not be nullified. Or if it is, it has a strong likelihood of cropping up again. We can think of examples or promptings of this from real life, such as intergenerational poverty and intergenerational cycles of violence, to name but two. But why is this all important? Why am I mentioning this? Why am I mentioning this in the great debate on genetics and environment and things of that nature? Well, it should be rather obvious. Say, for example, we have someone living somewhere in Africa who has the potential, the genetic capability to be really smart and to generate an insane amount of value for his community. If he's in some high-stress situation, as is often the case with Africa with entrenched poverty and famine and war and disease and crazy shit like that, well, his genome may be affected by epigenetics. He may have epigenetic tags placed on his, genes for intelligence, of which we know there are a few, and that may actually prevent him from synthesizing the relevant proteins he needs to be as smart as he's capable of being. And this, trickles down to the real world, and he's unable to generate this incredible amount of value for his community. Using our knowledge of epigenetics, we can see how someone's genetic potential can be hamstrung by environmental maladies. And as we now know that these epigenetic tags that prevent certain protein synthesis can be inherited, the environmental maladies, the things that affect this sort of epigenetic modification may have not even occurred within this individual's lifetime. It could be the environment the parents or even the grandparents grew up in. So that's all really important information to take on. We can't discount the impact of the environment on gene expression. Genetics is still the most important factor in determining, economic success and that sort of thing, depending on the factor. If we're going to look at IQ correlates very strongly with economic success and quality of life, and indeed even lifespan. I believe as your IQ increases, your lifespan increases quite a bit actually. It's quite astounding to see. But in our quest to improve people's lives and to make sure everyone has a good quality of life and to engage in this great debate, we can't discount the manipulations we can place on the environment. We should ensure people are growing up in stable, happy, caring home environments. First and foremost, we need to destroy this welfare state that encourages families to split up, the vicious divorce courts where women can make more money divorcing their husbands than ever staying with them together. The state will pay you to divorce your husband, the state will pay you to have children out of wedlock, and this all creates high stress situations. We know that children who grow up in the homes of single mothers are more likely to be criminals, more likely to be kicked out of school, more likely to self-harm. There's a lot of stress factors there that could have an impact on that person's gene expression. So that's what I wanted to bring to light today. The environment can have an impact on your gene expression, and this impact can be multi-generational. We need to be focusing more than just, who's coming into the country and what the genetic makeup of our countries are. We need to be looking at the environments in which people are living in. Not to the same extent, of course, but it still plays an impact, as we've seen within this video. We need to go after and reduce as much as possible things like political echo chambers that cause, a lot of stress within individuals, and such things such as single motherhood, which of course has disastrous effects for children. And the best way to tackle these issues, to solve these issues, to reduce them as much as humanly possible, is just to shine a light on them. You need to get out and speak to people, not just in real life, but on the internet too. It has never been easier to speak the truth. It has never been easier to fight the darkness. We have this amazing array of technology at our fingertips. Let's use it to advance the cause of reason and justice. Thanks all for sticking around, and have a good one.